Welcome back to session 2 of Not Just Another Wellness Workshop. In session 2, the focus is about you. You are the focus of person-centered well-being. These are the learning objectives. So in this session, we're going to be expanding on some of the topics that we covered in the first session. So we'll review the biopsychosocial spiritual model of health, polyvagal theory, and interoception. This session will focus on the physiological benefits of meditation and the research on meditation and the brain. We'll cover important areas of the brain that benefit from meditation and how to find or build a meditation practice that works for you, how trauma can get stuck in the body, and how yoga can enhance trauma recovery, the relationship between interoception and overall health, and the physical and mental health benefits of yoga nidra, which is a non-sleep deep rest. This is my disclaimer that this is not medical advice, and if you have any physical or mental health conditions that put you at risk, you should consult with your medical provider. And that this information is for general health promotion. We are exploring ways to rebalance an overwhelmed nervous system. These are the values of my workshop. As a reminder, safety, choice, and connection. In this series, all of the experiential practices are there to provide you with tools. You decide what supports you. My hope is that you learn something new and just stay curious about things that might seem unfamiliar. This is the model of health that I'm sharing, and you see here that the word spiritual is the outermost circle, which includes identity, meaning, and purpose. This is significant because these are the qualities that foster resilience. And all of the practices that I'm sharing are about how to foster resilience. Resilience is nurtured when we have developed our identity, some meaning, and we have purpose. And in my opinion, this model supports the ACE study. Both are taking away that blame and shame about the individual deficits, that old saying what's wrong with that person or what's wrong with you, and putting things in the context of one's environment and experiences. And this is what Dr. Porges is talking about in his polyvagal theory, that we as humans cannot be separated from our environment if we want to understand our physiology. He says that we need to start with practicing self-compassion, meaning recognizing who you are in the context of your environment. And then our bodies can understand messages of safety and connection through social engagement. And we will be exploring more about this topic. If you're interested in the topic of spiritual health, I recommend Lisa Miller's book, The Awakened Brain, The New Science of Spirituality, and Our Quest for the Inspired Life. Her book talks about how humans are universally hardwired, meaning in our brains, there's this capacity for spirituality, and that our brains become more resilient and robust as a result of this. This is a podcast interview that she did with the Rich Roll podcast, so it's available on the Wellness Project webpage. I'll play just a couple minutes of this.
There's no reason that the scientific lens has to be limited to interpretations or understandings that are simply material, only that which we can touch, which we can point to. Right now, we're not studying spirituality. We've been educated out of our awakened awareness. We've been educated out of our spiritual awareness.
What if I told you that all humans, all of us, are equipped with this innate capacity for spirituality? Maybe you can wrap your head around that, but here's the kicker. Now, hard science, I'm talking about neuroscience, actually proves that cultivating spirituality, what today's guest calls the awakened brain, leads to things like greater grit, greater optimism, greater resilience, and conversely insulates us against the
So if you're interested in that, please continue listening and watching that episode. So reminder from our first workshop that we're looking at yoga as an integrated system of supporting our health. So in that first session, we explored asanas and their effect on the brain. And now in this session, we're going to explore meditation. So yoga is a system of health. It's an integrated system consisting of ethics, which means how we relate to others and within ourselves. Asanas, which are those physical forms or shapes that we make. Pranayama, which is breath, but it's more than just breath. It's about the energy of breath. Meditation, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And then this holistic system or lifestyle of achieving greater physical, mental, and spiritual balance. Yoga supports the neuroendocrine immune system. So I like this model because it shows how the internal systems are connected to the external factors. The neuroendocrine immune system is multi-directional between neurotransmitters, hormones, and cytokines, which are influenced by external, meaning environmental factors, and internal, such as hormonal balance, mental health, and things like that. This model shows the interconnected systems, how they're communicating with each other. So the nervous system communicates through neurotransmitters, and that would be like serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine. The immune system communicates through the cytokines, which would be like T cells, and those are helping control the inflammation and defend your immune system if you get sick. And the endocrine system communicates through hormones. Porges has talked about this when he's describing situations where people have sought medical treatment for unexplained issues like digestion or fatigue. And if the medical model can't pinpoint the cause, then the patient can get diagnosed with things like IBS, fibromyalgia, things that are sort of medical mysteries. This is just a couple of examples where our health issues should probably also include environmental factors. And one more point here, the hypothalamus links the endocrine system and the nervous system. Nerve cells in the hypothalamus make chemicals that control the release of hormone secreted from the pituitary gland. So if you practiced session 1, where we did that tapam karam, which is where we crossed our thumbs, holding on to our earlobes, we crossed at the arms, and we did squats like this, that's linking the pituitary and adrenal glands. And so as you're squatting, you're increasing blood flow, and crossing the midline is activating that hemispheric integration. This is a recap from the first session. So if you missed that, here are the few of the highlights about the nervous system benefits of practicing slow, mindful practices. This is Dr. Dan Siegel, and he's a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA's School of Medicine, and he's the founding co-director of the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. He has many books and interviews that you can explore on your own time from his website, and the link is provided there. Neuroplasticity describes the brain's ability to adopt new functions, reorganize itself, make new neural connections as a function of experience. And research has shown that almost every major structure of the neuron is capable of change based on experience. However, not all regions of the brain are equally plastic. So regarding these 4 elements of neuroplasticity, focused awareness means being fully present so that we are open to receiving information from the body. Repetition enhances the neural pathways formation, and it also provides that sense of safety and familiarity. If you have heard of Laura Pele, she talks about feeling safe, connected, and in control, and that's the key to trauma healing. Novelty is the things that keep us interested and keep us coming back for more. And passion can include a sense of curiosity, and this is what keeps us engaged. So one of the quotes that I like from Dr. Siegel is, "Where attention goes, neural firing flows, neural connections grow." This is a video, so more about neuroplasticity from Dr. Dan Siegel. He says it starts with neural feelings, so fingers and toes, to build that interoceptive awareness. And that builds that part of the brain called the insula, which leads to understanding feelings and emotions in ourselves. And eventually, then it can lead to perspective taking and empathy.
We have from Sebastian, what is the best way to teach a child who does not experience support from his parents to express his emotions? Now, if you're talking about being a therapist, I like to start with something neutral, which would be like, what are the feeling in what's the feeling in your fingers? What do you feel in your feet? Maybe moving slowly. What do you feel in your face? What do you feel inside your heart? What do you feel in your stomach, in your gut, basically? Now, all of these interior signals, and this is a part of the Now Maps way that we have, what we call a compass, which is basically the wheel of awareness made for children. This compass allows you to aim the direction into what in scientific terms would be called interoception. So all sorts of studies, including studies at UCLA with these same colleagues, show that the more interoception you have, perception, that's the perception part of the interior, the more you build an area of the brain called the insula, especially the anterior insula on the right side of the brain. And so as you stream energy and information flow with awareness and the choice to focus attention on these internal signals, you're basically having where attention goes, neural firing flows, and neural connection grows. So you're actually growing the right anterior insula. We have from Sebastian.
So this is the insula. This is what he was talking about. This is the meaning-making part of the brain. The vagus nerve runs through the insula. It integrates input from the organs. It connects sensations and emotions so you can know how you feel, and it responds to gut feelings, and it can also override logic and reasoning. People with a trauma symptoms like anxiety and agitation, they often have an abnormal activation of the insula. Functional neuroimaging have linked the insula with desires, cravings, addiction, and psychiatric disorders. Slow yoga practice helps send accurate messages to the insula so that it starts to learn to respond appropriately. And that can help you relax when you need to or help you activate when you need to. And this type of training then begins to override the older patterns of feeling anxious, irritable, depressed, maybe freaked out a little bit or shut down. When you feel safe and you're in touch with your body, you can get in better touch with your values and priorities. And from there, you can make clear decisions about your health and well-being. This is what we introduced in the first session, which was called the salutogenic model of health. This is the diencephalon. It's another brain structure that I wanted to mention because it is the primary relay for sensory input. There's a link between the nervous system and the endocrine system, which we've reviewed, and that includes the thalamus, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal. And this recognizes impulses of our body temperature, pain, appetite, emotions, circadian rhythms, blood pressure, and sex drive. And it also gets dysregulated with trauma. This is a little map, a little visual here about interoception, and it's the body's way of communicating with the brain. This is the ability and then the process of learning how to feel and know your internal sensations. The primary function is homeostasis. So when you feel and know who you are, this can reduce inflammation. Unconscious body states influence your emotions and behavior and decision making. The more we practice interoception by bringing our awareness to our internal feelings and sensations, the more we can stimulate and strengthen the insula. And as you build this internal connection, the more insight you have and the more empathy then that you can develop. When we have poor vagal tone, then the organs don't function properly. So with poor interoception, it can lead to things like our brain, we have racing thoughts, maybe our heart is racing, maybe we have some issues with our lungs, our liver, kidneys, stomach. All these things can suffer if we have poor interoception and poor vagal tone. When we have healthy interoception, this fosters that parasympathetic homeostasis. So interoception can be a double-edged sword. It can aggravate unpleasant emotions, but when you lean into noticing sensations from a place of non-attachment, which would mean like I'm open to being aware. I want to investigate what this sensation is. I want to invite sensations in. Then you train your nervous system to explore something that might be uncomfortable. And you do that with curiosity, and that builds resilience. And this is the shift that enhances healing. This is a skill to learn, and it takes a lot of practice. And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes to build awareness. This is Kelly Mahler. She's an interoception groupie by her personal definition. She's also an occupational therapist, and we consult with her quite a bit. So I wanted to offer her website for more information. She has a curriculum and she has an activity deck that many people may find helpful in their work. Now let's talk about meditation. There are 3 important brain structures to mention. This is the triad of the brain structures that assess what's going on. The left prefrontal cortex, which is dorsal lateral, controls and makes sense of your bodily sensations and emotions. When this is active, you're able to interpret what's going on with your body, and you have accurate sense of comfort or discomfort, and you can make decisions on the basis of that interpretation. The anterior cingulate cortex is the part that interprets bodily signals like breathing, heart rate, appropriate for the circumstances, pain, even like if you have an itch or pleasure, things like that. The left prefrontal cortex interprets what's going on in the anterior cingulate cortex. And then the anterior cingulate cortex gets input from the amygdala and the other areas like the heart, the gut, breathing. And these structures work closely with the insula, also interpreting signals of what's going on outside of you. So what happens in the form of meditation is when we close our eyes, it shuts down that exteroception, that outside world, and it puts us in touch with our internal world. 40% of the brain is vision, so closing our eyes when it feels safe for you, it can provide easier access to your internal sensations. Practices that are focused on interoception and proprioception enhance the function of the insula, anterior cingulate cortex, and the whole sensory motor cortex. So yogic meditation, these are meditation styles. This session includes samples of these different styles of meditation. Think of this as sort of a dress rehearsal. There's no one size fits all. Each style has different effects, and then these effects are personal. So I encourage you to try each type a few times and see how your experience is, see how your system responds. Your experience may change over time or even day to day, so it's nice to return to these different styles and see if you have a different experience. Meditation practice can be adapted to fit your lifestyle, your preferences, and your existing daily routines, or even your belief systems. So think of these different styles as many paths leading to the same destination, which is inner peace. And in yoga, that's referred to as samadhi. These are the brain benefits of having a meditation practice. So increasing gray matter in the prefrontal cortex is associated with our working memory and our executive functioning. Activating the frontoparietal lobes is associated with the attention networks. The left hippocampus assists in learning, cognition, and memory. The temporal parietal junction is associated with empathy. And overall, we have a decreased amygdala, which is associated with a reduction in stress and activity. These are some of the effects of meditation on the brain, like I just mentioned. So, healing from an overwhelmed or a traumatized nervous system requires restoring the nervous system. Brain scans show those who spend more time in attention network areas of the brain through meditation are less likely to develop mood disorders, anxiety, and stress. And those who spend more time in that default mode network, which is where the mind is kind of wandering, and a lot of times it might go towards something negative, they're more at risk to have depression or mood disorders. So, more time in meditation leads to better self regulation, according to the research and these brain scans. Even brain scans after a single yoga class show increases in GABA, which is the inhibitor neurotransmitter. So the default mode network, all humans have this. This is for our protection, and we can get caught up in this sort of mind wandering. Now, we all sort of tend to zone out from time to time, but when we spend too much time in this mind wandering, it can usually lead to more worry and stress. Those of you who know Mary Vicario, she says the greatest human fear is disconnection and the greatest human need is connection. Most of our fear is related to our connection with our ego, and our fear is about humiliation. If we practice sending positive messages, we can reprogram our neural pathways. Reprogramming neural pathways towards fulfillment rather than fear is not something that happens to us or for us. It actually happens through us, and it requires surrender. The act of surrender in Sanskrit is called Ishvara Pranidhana, and the surrender is about remembering or rediscovering who we truly are. This is a deep dive into the how and why of meditation. There's lots of science in this, of course. It's Dr. Huberman. He's discussing assessing your natural preference to determine if you are drawn to interoception or exteroception. He says that challenge for us is actually good for strengthening our brain. So practicing a meditation style that goes against your natural or your easy state will invoke the most neuroplasticity. So for example, if eyes closed, focusing inward, versus eyes open, focusing externally on something. So if one of those seems a little more accessible to you, that's okay, start there, but then don't give up on the other method. So go back and try the other method because that's what's going to improve your neuroplasticity. He also in this talk is talking about state versus trait. So we're exploring these practices as tools to change our state. Neuroplasticity is about changing the trait. So these practices take time, lots of practice, and lots of patience. He also discusses mind wandering. And in the references for this workshop series, I included an article called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. Something to consider. You don't have to necessarily agree, but there is research on this, so I just wanted to provide that as well.
Us to a tool, and it's a tool that any and all of us can use, whether or not you tend to be interoceptively dominant, right? That you tend to pay more attention to your bodily sensations, or exteroceptively dominant. And again, if you don't know the answer to that question, there's a simple test that you can do. You can just sit down or lie down, close your eyes, and you can ask yourself or assess whether or not your attention tends to fleet to things outside of you, right? Cars honking or going by, people in the room, or whether or not you tend to be able to focus on your internal landscape to the exclusion of exteroception and attention to things outside the confines of your skin easily. Now, of course, this will depend on context and situation, even how well rested you are, et cetera, but that's exactly the point. This is the sort of thing you want to do every time you decide to do a meditation practice. In fact, I would suggest that you use this to determine what meditation you do at any given moment. So let's say you are somebody who is a regular meditator, or let's say you're somebody who's never meditated and you'd like to develop a meditation practice. I suggest that you do a test of whether or not you are more interoceptively dominant or exteroceptively dominant in that moment. Okay? This is not a personality trait. This is a question about where you happen to be in a moment. So
Altered Traits is the name of a book by Richard Davidson. He's a professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the founder and director of the Center for Healthy Minds. He's best known for his groundbreaking work studying emotion in the brain. And the hyperlink provided in this PowerPoint is a TED Talk that he did. The video that's here is an interview, and I'll play a few minutes where he talks about his research results from meditation.
One is neuroplasticity and the other is epigenetics. Neuroplasticity is the idea that the brain changes in response to experience.
This is very recent, is it
Very
not?
recent.
Like completely recent, like
Very-
within a decade and a half.
last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Exactly. And neuroplasticity happens all the time, wittingly or unwittingly. And most of the time, neuroplasticity is happening unwittingly. Most of the time, our brains are being shaped by forces around us about which we have little awareness.
So if you binge watch Game of Thrones, is that neuroplasticity?
Yeah, so, it's...
Sorry about that. But
It's a sobering reflection because we are just continuously being shaped in this way. And epigenetics is the science of how genes are regulated. And we're all born with a fixed complement of base pairs that constitute our DNA. And for the most part, that's not going to change. But what will change is the extent to which different genes are turned on and turned off. And so you can think of genes having little volume controls that go from low to high. And that varies a lot. And it turns out that those variations are really meaningful for health. And one of the things we found is just a couple of years ago, we published a paper showing that if we bring meditators to the laboratory, and these are folks like us who are not professional meditators, who have day jobs, and have them practice for a full day, and we just take a blood sample in the morning and then in the late afternoon, after a period of, say, 6 or 7 hours of practice, we actually can see changes in gene expression and in these what we call epigenetic marks that are observable. And we were specifically looking at changes in gene expression for genes that are involved in inflammation, which is an important domain in many chronic illnesses. One is neuroplasticity.
If you remember from the first session, I talked a lot about the impact of prolonged inflammation. So that is important information to maybe go back and re-listen to on your own time. These are what he called the 4 pillars of well-being. Meta-awareness is like mindfulness. It's staying present or coming back to the present. It's not mind wandering and it's not being zoned out. Connection are qualities for healthy social relations like kindness, compassion, social relationships, gratitude. Insight is that sense of curiosity. It's also about the knowledge we have of ourself and the narrative that we construct. This is about changing the relationship to the narrative. So I call this not getting attached or caught up in our story. This is the realization that our narrative is very limiting and insight is liberating. And then finally, purpose is how to find meaning in what we do in our daily routines. So this is very similar to Dan Siegel's 4 ingredients for neuroplasticity, which were focused awareness, repetition, novelty, and passion. So the first one is a mantra practice. This mantra is a mental message. This is what we hear. Built off of what we hear, we become. So using a repeated phrase, the one that I offer quite often is, I am so safe. I am so strong. I am peaceful. And I also add a mudra, which is just taking each fingertip to thumb tip. So for this one, it's I am so safe. I am so strong. I am peaceful. And I do that over and over again in a rhythmic beat. I can do this sometimes if I'm walking. It doesn't have to be, I'm just placing my hands up so that it can be seen. But if I were walking, of course, my hands would just be by my sides. No one would even notice that I'm doing this. So that rhythm is very calming for our system. And the mental message of safety, strength, and peace starts to set in. You can also do this with letters. So you could use the letter CALM for calm. So CALM. So if you're about to do something and you're not feeling calm about it, you can start sending those mental messages, and linking the mudra is also very important, tactile. So we're just touching each fingertip to our thumb to say the letters of calm, to say the words that I am so safe, calm, strong, peaceful. You could also say the letters of your name if that works out for you. So if your name is Sarah, S-A-R-A, John, J-O-H-N, finding something that's personal is the most important part of this. The other one that I wanted to offer, there's a video here. This is by me, and this is an introduction to doing this mantra and meditation using what's known as sa, ta, na, ma. And the meaning of that mantra, sa means infinity, ta means life, na means death, and ma means rebirth. This mantra translates to shutting the old you and becoming who you were meant to be, your true self. And it's also known to calm you down and increase the serotonin. So this would be perfect for anyone with stress, anxiety, or depression. Again, this is something you can do when you're just walking. Maybe you're walking down a hallway. You could start saying to yourself, sa, ta, na, ma, sa, ta, na, ma. Very simple way to approach meditation for the first time, because you're getting that rhythm, you're getting some mental message with the mantra, and it's approachable and it's accessible at any time. Your eyes can be open, your eyes can be closed. So if you're interested in trying this out, I go into more explanation in this video, which is available and will be linked in this presentation. Mindfulness, as described by Jon Kabat-Zinn, is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And then he says he sometimes adds in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. Jon Kabat-Zinn is the founder of the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society at UMass Medical School. He's the author of Full Catastrophe Living, Wherever You Go, There You Are, Coming to Our Senses, and Mindfulness for Beginners. He trains, teaches, and lectures throughout the world on applications of mindfulness, and he's also a professor of medicine emeritus at UMass Medical School. He emphasized that mindfulness is not a mental trick. Rather, it is a basic human inheritance that is essential to life. We need to be optimally aware of who we are, where we are, and how we are in order to survive individually and as communities, and even as a species in his view. He says that mindfulness is aimed at cultivating moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness. Non-judgmental means that you'll become aware of how judgmental you are and then not judge that, and then see if you can let go for a few moments, that restraining order that filters everything through our likes and dislikes or wants and aversions. And he adds another aspect of mindfulness, which is pure awareness, and that it's not just formal meditation practice, but in some sense, living life in every moment that we have to live. He says mindfulness is not a magical state to acquire. What we're doing is we're embracing it all in awareness so that we can actually navigate moments with as much clarity, equanimity, and balance as possible, and not merely to be balanced for ourselves, but for the sake of being in deep connection with what's actually happening. And since we're social beings, that includes all of the different ways that we're folded into our families, into our history, into our society, and into every aspect, including the planetary aspect of how we are in relationship to nature, Mother Nature, and the future that we're bequeathing to our future generations. The link that is provided here is to mindful.org. It includes a full interview with him, information about mindfulness-based stress reduction, that's his 8-week program, information about mindfulness, and some guided meditations. So what I hear most often, and I even find myself struggling with this, is what if I don't have time to meditate? So John Kabat-Zinn sat down with Oprah, I think this was one of her Super Soul Sunday interviews, and he says, take a shower. So it doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it doesn't have to be something you plan or schedule. So I'll play just a minute of this video.
It's interesting when people have a difficult time understanding it. I think your shower example is the best.
Yeah. You remember that?
Yeah.
I like to say to people, okay, here's a little homework for you after we've talked about mindfulness, and it's very important to keep in mind that mindfulness is not a concept, it's a practice. You have to actually exercise a certain kind of muscle. So I say, here's a little mindfulness homework for you. The next time you're in the shower, check and see if you're in the shower. Because you may not be in the shower, or you may have your whole Monday morning 9 o'clock meeting in the shower with you. But you're not actually there under the water, feeling the water on your skin. You're off in the future or off in the past. So that's exercising the muscle. The more you do that, the more you realize, when I'm in the shower, I'm in the shower. When I'm brushing my teeth, I'm brushing my teeth. When I'm saying goodbye to my family, I'm saying goodbye to my family. It only takes a fraction of a second longer to do it with awareness.
Okay, so everybody who's watching this right now, the next time you get in the shower, you're going to think, am I in the shower? Or are you in the meeting? Or are you already on the freeway?
Yeah.
Check.
And as soon as you check, you're back. And you have something you can do about it. If you are obsessed with some kind of thing, worried about how things are going to go that day or whatever, that's all fine. Your awareness is big enough to hold it all. It's not like now you have to suppress all that thinking or the meeting in the shower. The knowing it is good enough. That knowing is what we call awareness. And then it's laughable. So you'll feel better because you have a sense of humor.
It's interesting when people have a...
This is Tara Brock, and this is about trauma-sensitive mindfulness. Wanted to make sure that we touch on this. She says, we are wounded in relationship. We need relationship for healing. Meditation is essential for all deep, authentic healing. She is recommending David Treleaven's book, Trauma-Sensitive Mindfulness. She says there are times when it isn't wise to lean in to process post-traumatic stress disorder. Instead, we need to nurture ourselves. So this is an excellent talk. Again, this will be linked and you can watch this separately on your own time. All of these links are also available on the Wellness Project webpage. So on that note, when to go slow would be contraindicated. So it's also important to understand that slow is not always best. It takes practice. We can't do subtle practices once and expect life changes. It takes repetition. Just like anything else that you would do that's new, you can't do it once and expect to be proficient. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice and patience. So if you or the person that's in front of you are feeling anxious or dissociated, I say start with movement. Things like saying, take a deep breath. If a person is feeling anxious, they might just be breathing in their upper chest. And so that's not helpful to say, take a deep breath, because they physically can't in that moment. So starting with some movement might be better. So going on a walk is a great way. If you're feeling anxious or you're feeling like you're not connected to what's going on in the moment, taking a walk is a great way to just bring you back into where you are. And as you're taking that walk with that person, ask them to feel their feet making contact with whatever surface is underneath them. Allow your eyes to stay open if you're feeling anxious. Rhythmic movements, steady movements, consistent movement. So even if you aren't able to walk, if you're seated in a chair, you could even do some sort of chair walking by pressing down one foot and lifting up the other, going back and forth. You can squeeze and release your toes. You can squeeze and release your fingers. You can shake your hands out. You could do twists where you kind of look like a helicopter. Depending on how much space you have, those kind of movements bring you back into your body. So just start with one movement. And then maybe as you're doing that one movement, maybe you start to bring in some breath awareness. You don't need to manipulate the breath in any way. So you don't have to try and elongate the inhale or the exhale. Just bring your awareness to your breath. And then always orient yourself or the person that you're with to the present moment. Notice where you are in the room. Notice the things around you. Notice the people around you. And hopefully there's some calm energy around that person or you. And then once you begin to reduce some of that anxiety, then maybe you'd be available, approachable for things like a body awareness meditation where you focus on different body parts. You focus on making contact with the floor. If you're seated, noticing your weight in the seat, noticing how the cushion feels, noticing your breath. If you're still having that shortness of breath, then don't notice the breath. But maybe eventually you work your way towards a relaxation practice in your seat. This is a short meditation by me. This is a body awareness meditation using some cross patterning. This is a cross patterning meditation. Settle into your seat. Place your hands on your lap. Close your eyes if that feels good for you, or soften your eyes to rest slightly downward. Maybe you roll your shoulders a few times, and then place the shoulder blades on your back. Slide your chin slightly back. Notice your back body and lengthen through the crown of your head as if you could lengthen your ears upward. Notice your breath. Now bring some awareness to your hands. Feel your hands from the inside out. I'm going to name parts of the body. You may like bringing your awareness to each part as I name it. If it ever feels like too much, you can always come back to noticing your breath or noticing any sensations in your hands. Right eye, left ear. Left eye, right ear. Right temple, left jaw. Left temple, right jaw. right shoulder, left hip, left shoulder, right hip, right knee, left foot, left knee, right foot, right arm, left hand, left arm, right hand, both hands, both feet, both hips, both shoulders. Now place one hand at your heart and one hand at your belly. Notice what you feel. Feel into any sensations. Release your hands as you're ready. Slowly blink your eyes open if they were closed, and lift your gaze. This is a meditation by Joan Halifax. It's called Strong Back, Soft Front. She's written this book called Being with Dying. I highly recommend listening to that meditation. Also reading this book, and I won't be playing it in this presentation, but if you're interested, again, the link will be provided. This is Bessel van der Kolk. He's the author of the famous book, Body Keeps the Score. He's one of the most preeminent psychiatrists and researcher on trauma, and he founded the Trauma Research Foundation. He talks about how trauma is about gut-wrenching feelings, and yoga can help you get unstuck. And the research study that he did on yoga found that it worked better than medication. I'll play just a couple minutes.
To know, as like our research showed, that a steady yoga practice for a traumatized person is more effective than any medication that anybody has studied. It doesn't mean that you should not be taking medications, but overall, statistically speaking, yoga in the long range has more beneficial effects than medications. But that doesn't mean that doing yoga is going to make you immediately feel better. What we find actually is that when people start doing yoga, starting to feel your body may bring up feelings of helplessness, terror, etc., etc. So part of what yoga can do for you, and having a good yoga teacher, is to help you, to give you the courage to begin to face your sensations. And we give people an intimation in our workshop of that experience.
I'm going to go backwards for just a second here. The contemplative practice is another form of meditation, and this particular practice and this particular book is one that deserves much more discussion, much more thought, much more practice. And I highly recommend, if you haven't ever been around death or you haven't experienced that passing, read the book anyway, because at some point you will be in that place and it makes it a lot less scary. But this particular practice, Strong Back, Soft Front, prepares us for anything. Doesn't necessarily have to be about passing over. We all face challenges. We all have to go through them. We all have to show up for something that might be a little bit scary, but understanding that we have the strength in our back body, as well as that soft receptive place in our front body, allows for a feeling of equanimity in the body. And that's what this meditation is all about. So I think it's really important. And I just wanted to go back to review that. This is Gabor Mate. He says that trauma is about what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. Trauma is a physiological response. It's not a psychological experience. By treating it as a psychological issue, and that means talk therapy and medication, we are missing a critical point, and that is that the nervous system has been impacted. These are Mate's words. I'm just sharing them with you. He's written a number of books. One of them that's most recent is The Myth of Normal. He's also written a book that I recommend called When the Body Says No. If you want to know more about trauma in the body, I highly recommend picking up one of his books or researching a little bit more about him. There's the saying, issues in our tissues. So again, trauma is a physiological response, not a psychological experience. Therefore, it's crucial in trauma treatment to apply brain integration strategies, which creates neurological connections. So by treating it as a psychological issue only, using only talk therapy or medication, we're missing that nervous system piece that's been impacted. Maybe our nervous system has been shifted towards that dorsal vagal side. So interventions that focus on talking about the event are going to fall short of healing because it isn't integrated into the deeper layers of our being, our tissues, our cells. We need interventions that restore balance to our nervous system. Therapy that uses front brain exclusively, meaning talking exclusively, they cannot affect the neuroplastic changes to the same extent as therapies that also include the body. Gains made in therapy sessions may be lost when the client leaves a session because the therapy didn't engage parts of the brain and body which affect self-regulation. So how does trauma get stuck in the body? Peter Levine, who is a prominent somatic therapist, made an interesting finding that people from the 9/11 tragedy who were stuck and couldn't escape or help someone else escape were more likely to experience PTSD than people who could run, escape, or react. The physical movement during the event helped the brain process and react in more functional ways. Trauma is stored in our subtle body. Yoga and meditation affect the subtle body. After natural disasters, people want to come together and do repair. This releases that sympathetic response. And if this gets interrupted, sometimes people get moved to another location. It can lead to trauma because the body needs to complete the process. Mind-body split. Bessel says, fundamentally, words can't integrate the disorganized sensations and action patterns that form the core imprint of the trauma. If it happens in early childhood, meaning pre-language development, we cannot think our way through with talk therapy alone. It is stuck subcortically, and it's not accessible via thinking. Often it's thought that a person cannot remember something that happened during their early childhood, but it's not a thought or a memory narrative issue. It's an altered bodily issue, meaning nervous system issue. Feelings get stuck in the gut. When we create an atmosphere of safety in the nervous system, like through a subtle yoga practice, then if feelings arise, these can be explored with an invitation for a new perspective. So saying things like noticing sensations in your belly. The more we practice, so the repetition, the easier it becomes to recognize that the emotion is there, but we have a choice in how we respond to it. There's also a link that I wanted to provide here with a conversation with Ezra Klein. Trauma causes this mind-body split to manage this overwhelmed disconnection. So again, if you're interested in more, I wanted to provide these resources. Deb Dana, Wanted to provide a quote from her. She's also a student of Stephen Porges, so she speaks on her own, in her own right, about polyvagal theory. She says, neuroception precedes perception. Story follows state. Through a polyvagal framework, the important question, what happened, is stored not to document the details of the event, but to learn about the autonomic response. The clues to a client's present time suffering can be found in their autonomic response history. The next meditation practice is a visualization practice, and this is a yantra. Yantra means machine or contraption, and it's a geometrical diagram, and it's mainly from the tantric tradition. You could also do this using a candle, practicing candle gazing. There's no particular reason I chose this image. I just am drawn to the color green. So to practice this, you would allow your body to settle in to the position that you're in. Allow your breath to be comfortable. Allow your body to be comfortable. You allow your eyes to look at the yantra. Look at the outer circle. Start with noticing the outer circle. Then allow your eyes to close and let the yantra rest in your heart center. Then open your eyes and look again at the yantra and notice the inner circle. And then close your eyes and notice any sensations, especially around your gut, if there's any response there. Open your eyes again. Take in the yantra. Close your eyes again and rest in your heart center. Noticing any sensations. When you're ready, allow your eyes to open. And you could repeat this a few times, so you could come back to this type of practice. This is called Brahmari breaths. It's the sound of a bee, sound that the bee makes. So we're going to try this. You're going to try this. You're making the sound mm. You can play with a lower pitch or a mid pitch. It's a slow, resonant sound like a bee. And the key is vibration. This is known to help with headaches, also sore throats. But there are contraindications, so not great if you are menstruating, pregnant, if you have untreated high blood pressure, epilepsy, or if you're having an active ear infection. The picture here is showing someone closing off the other senses, so can't necessarily see how she's doing this, but her thumbs are closing off this part of her ear. So that fold right there that helps us hear, her thumb is closing that off. And then she's also closing off her eyes, and she's resting her middle finger and her ring finger around her nose, and then her pinkies by her bottom lip. Now, you don't have to do all of that. If you want to just start with this, you don't have to close off your ears. You don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to do any of that. If you're just playing with this, you could just and notice how that vibration feels within you. If you have more time, you want to practice this during times when you're feeling a little stressed or you have a headache or something, then closing off at least the ears is a great way to really sense and tune into that vibration. So I'll do this 2 or 3 times. You can do it with me. When you're finished, we'll move on. Mm. If your ears were closed, I'm going to open them up now and we will continue on. Before we go, each time you practice a meditation style, just take a pause and notice how you're feeling. Notice if there's been any change in sensation or mindset or mood or anything. Just take that in and notice it. Another practice, meditation style, is called Yoga Nidra. This is yogic sleep, and the founder of iRest is Richard Miller. He wrote the book Yoga Nidra, The Meditative Heart of Yoga. He has a website that will be linked here about iRest, and he has a free course and some additional resources as well. Yoga Nidra is a meditation practice of deep rest that often helps people who struggle with calming the mind for sleep. The word nidra means sleep in Sanskrit. It's most often practiced lying down, supported with blankets and a pillow. It is a practice of physical surrender for the body to facilitate mental spaciousness or consciousness, clarity for the purpose of deep rest. Richard Miller created the integrative restoration program known as iRest. It's a modern adaptation of the ancient non-dual meditation practice of Yoga Nidra. Richard Miller has been researching the efficacy on health, healing, and well-being with diverse populations, including active duty soldiers, veterans, college students, children, seniors, homeless, incarcerated, and people experiencing PTSD, sleep disorders, chemical dependency, chronic pain, and related disorders. In the Andrew Huberman podcast episode I linked earlier, he talks about Yoga Nidra as well. He says it reduces cortisol better than traditional meditation. This can be done any time of day to be beneficial, and 30 minutes can replenish our dopamine level. I can tell you from my personal experience of practicing live with Richard Miller many years ago, as well as other teachers, that I have experienced a lot of profound inner peace during this practice, and the benefits seem to last longer than other styles. I also turn to this if I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm having trouble going back to sleep. And I agree that just 30 minutes of this practice allows me to feel more refreshed, and it's as if I had slept for a few hours. The next practice is a breath awareness practice. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali doesn't really provide specific pranayama techniques. He gives a few pointers. He says that the breath should be slow, subtle, and smooth. He suggests focusing on a long, smooth exhale. He says the most important aspect of pranayama is the subtle experience of the life force of prana that lies beneath the breath. It's in connecting with the prana that we can experience a deeper awareness, identity, and healing. This breath practice is available in the Wellness Project webpage, which will be linked for you. At this point, I'm going to keep us moving on. From Carl Jung, he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are." And I hope that through these meditation styles, I've given you the tools to go find out who you really are. Thank you so much for watching this session. If you have any questions, here is my contact information.